So we're going to have a look at the next section of our stylized tank model, which is the gun section, which comes out from the turret, which we've already created. And with that, we're going to be looking at our third tool, which is Extrude. So we're going to start off with a cylinder shape. So I'm going to go to the top left-hand corner, and click on the cylinder shape, and that will bring in a cylinder polygon object into our scene. I'm going to move it up, and I'm going to rotate it so it's the correct orientation. So I'm going to go into my rotate mode, hover over the red circle, and this time I'm just going to hold down J while I move the object. It just means it will snap where I need it to snap, so that we can get that perfectly horizontal in the scene. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to scale down, making sure that I am uniformly scaling it down with this center cube, the scale tool, until I'm relatively happy with the size here. Once I've done that, I'm just going to roughly move it into place just so I can get an idea of the size that it needs to be, and refine that a little bit before we create the object in full. So I'll scale it down a little bit because it looks a touch too big for the turret that we've got. And I would say we're getting close to that looking good. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to just squash it down a little bit and move that back to place. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to have a look at is extruding the edges, but there's a tiny bit of prep work we need to do just before we do that. The first thing we need to do before we do that is to delete these faces, these top faces here. So I'm going to go into face mode, and I'm going to teach another selection method or selection trick that we can use rather than having to select every face individually. We're going to hold down Tab, and that will just allow us to paint select. So that means we can just drag our mouse over where we want to select. And you'll notice that if I move my camera around, it hasn't accidentally selected any faces behind, which is really useful. So we've selected all of those faces, and then we're going to just delete them. And what that means now is that we can extrude from our edges. So I'm going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to double click to select the full edge loop, and I'm going to go and use our new tool, which is Extrude. And Extrude essentially allows us to, I will show you what this extrude has done to our edge. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch into our scale mode, so that the shortcut for that is R, and that will give us our scale tool. And if I scale down, you can see that we've created an additional layer of edges that we can then shape and pull and push around until we're happy with it. So I'm going to move the edges to about here, so we've got a nice edge here, or a border around our gun. So make it a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to extrude once again. So extrude, extrude. And this time I'm just going to use the arrows that appear when you extrude. And I'm going to use the blue arrow here to pull out the length of our gun. And I can use our left view here to get an idea of how long we need this to be. So it'll probably be around here. And once I've done that, I'm going to go back into the normal selection mode by pressing Q. and I'm going to extrude again. I'm going to create a kind of another bracket for the gun. So I'm going to extrude again, and this time I'm going to go back to my scale tool and I'm going to scale up. Now what I want to do is get this roughly the same size as this bracket that we've got at the beginning. And that's going to be a little bit difficult to do in the viewport that we're in at the moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press spacebar on my keyboard, and that will bring us out to these 3 additional views that we have for us. You'll see one of them's our side view, one of them's our front view, and one of them is our top view. Now, what we're doing here, we need to look into our front view. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hover my mouse over the front view, which you can see labelled at the bottom of each viewport. And I'm going to press the spacebar key, and that's going to full screen that. I'm then going to press F to focus in and just to zoom out a little bit so I can focus in on what I'm doing here. And then I'm going to continue to scale this up. You can see we can now very clearly see or compare the scale of this first bracket that we've got to the new bracket that we are creating. So we want this to be roughly the same size. So once we're happy with that, we need to switch back to our original viewport. And to do this, I'm just going to press spacebar again on my keyboard. Then I'm going to hover my mouse over our top right-hand corner view and press the spacebar again. And now we're back in our perspective viewport. And then I'm going to extrude again. So down to my modeling toolkit and click on extrude. This time I'm going to switch to the move tool. And I'm going to move the edges out to about there. Extrude again. Switch to my scale tool. And then I'm going to go back into my front view again. So spacebar, hover the mouse over the front view, spacebar again. I'm going to scale down so we have the same uniform sizes. I'm going to do the same thing again, back into my perspective view. And this time we'll do a little extrusion because we want kind of like a little slit detail in the end of the gun. So I'm going to extrude out, but not too much. Once again, extrude and into my scale tool. And go back into my front view so I can make sure I'm keeping that uniform size. And finally, I am going to switch back into my perspective view. Extrude once again, so go and click on extrude. Bring this out and probably try and make these, oh, I think let's have this bit slightly shorter than the first bracket. And then we'll do a couple more extrusions to finish the basic shape of the gun. So once again, I'm going to go to extrude. And I'm going to scale this down. And this time I'm going to eyeball it because I want this is going to be the end of the gun. So we're just going to decide how big we want the sort of bullet hole to be, or rocket hole. Okay, and then so I'll say about there, and then once again go to extrude and switch to my move tool this time, and I'm going to move it back as far as I can go really to cover the inside of that section. All we need to do is just make sure that this inside section is not larger than this section here, otherwise we'll get a little bit of overlapping. As long as we've made that bit small enough, we should be good. So our turret section, we have the basic shape, but same again, similar to the turret, we've got a little bit of blocky edges and some sharp corners that we want to try and resolve. So I'm going to utilise the bevel tool again. So I'm going to go to my edge. This time I'm going to select all of the edges that I want to bevel because we want to apply a consistent bevel across for this particular object. That means we can just select all of the edges that we need and bevel it all in one go. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm just going to double click on each of the edge loops that I'd like to bevel. And I'm going to try and get these inside sections as well, so I maybe have to zoom in a little bit. Make sure I'm getting both of these edges. And also the start section as well. I'm going to bevel this edge as well. Okay. So once I've got all the edges that I'd like to bevel selected, I'm going to head back into my modelling toolkit and I'm going to click on bevel. And we can, just like last time, we can adjust the fraction and the segments to suit the look that we'd like to replicate for our gun. So now our edges are looking a lot more smooth and I think we're ready to move on to the next section.